A week after the meeting between Pope Leo XIV and Cardinal Sarah, the question remains unanswered. Was it truly a sign of communion or the prelude to an imminent rift? Apparently, a confidential conversation, in reality, the emblem of a divided church, balanced between tradition and new models, where every word can weigh like a crack. This is where the future lies. If tensions continue to escalate, unity itself risks breaking. Want to truly understand what's happening behind those closed doors? Watch to the end. In recent weeks, an interview given by Cardinal Robert Sarah to the Catholic newspaper Avenir has reignited a debate that has long been simmering within the Church, that of liturgy, synodality, and the doctrinal orientation of the pontificate. It is no small detail that these words came just days before the private audience that Pope Leo XIV granted to Sarah, one of the most emblematic prelates of the traditionalist movement. The effect was immediate. The statements tore away the veil of silence and highlighted an internal tension that can no longer be ignored. On the one hand, a cardinal who upholds the richness of the ancient rites denounces the theological fragility of fiducia supplicans and warns against the risk of a synodality transformed into ideology. On the other hand, a pope who reiterates that he does not want to introduce a form of democracy into the Church while speaking of communion as a community experience and no longer as an exclusively vertical structure. The result is the image of a Vatican riven by opposing currents, where the debate is no longer merely academic, but touches on the concrete life of faith. Sarah's interview thus became the spark that clearly exposed a conflict that many preferred to deny. Cardinal Robert Sarah, speaking of the ancient Mass, used words that sound like a manifesto in defense of tradition. Cardinal Sarah reaffirmed that every baptized person has a place in the Church if they remain faithful to their beliefs and the morality that flows from them. He recalled that the variety of rites, far from being a problem, has always represented a richness for Catholicism since, in the unity of faith, there was no confusion. He also emphasized that a rite doesn't originate in a single office, but is the fruit of centuries of theological and liturgical sedimentation. Hence his question, is it really possible to prohibit a millennia-old rite? For the cardinal, it would be like preventing someone from drawing on living sources of theology, comparable to prohibiting the study of St. Augustine for those who wish to understand grace or the Trinity. Sarah emphasized the vitality of African faith, capable of offering freshness, authenticity, and enthusiasm at a time when the West appears tired and burdened by prosperity. He recalled how the blood of the martyrs continues to be the seed of new Christians, emphasizing that African communities still pay a very high price today in terms of persecution and sacrifice. In his opinion, this very martyrdom that marks the African Church is destined to bear fruit, demonstrating how faith lived under trial can restore strength to the entire universal Church. One of the most powerful passages in the interview concerns the document Fiducia Supplicans, still at the center of controversy and tension. Sarah did not mince her words, deeming it theologically weak and therefore unjustified. In his opinion, not only does it bring no benefit to the life of the Church, but it also endangers its very unity. The Cardinal reiterated that this is a text that should simply be forgotten because it offers no clarity to either pastors or the faithful. On the contrary, its publication ended up strengthening existing internal pressures, giving oxygen to progressive activism, both among priests and lay people. His words sound like a direct accusation, not just a personal opinion, but an indication that we are faced with a doctrinal drift disguised as a pastoral gesture. In this sense, Sarah wanted to warn the Church. What appears to be an openness actually risks turning into a factor of division and confusion. The most delicate point concerns synodality. Cardinal Sarah clarified that it cannot be considered an end, but only a means. The true goal, he emphasized, remains communion, which is hierarchical because this is how Christ wanted his church. Synodality, on the other hand, is at most a style, a path that can support communion but not replace it. It is a seemingly technical distinction, but in reality, it is a direct blow to the heart of the current ecclesial structure. If communion is reduced to a synodal process, we run the risk of pitting two models of the Church against each other, one rooted in tradition and one shaped by the modern democratic spirit. The tension with Pope Leo XIV arises precisely here. In a recent interview with Crux, the pontiff stated that synodality does not mean transforming the Church into a democracy, but remains a way to come together, build community, and seek communion together. A position that seeks to reassure, but which brings with it an ambiguity. For the Pope, communion appears as a communal, more horizontal experience, while for Sarah, it is a vertical reality linked to the hierarchical order willed by God. The private meeting between the two, which took place a few days after Sarah's statements, thus takes on a particular significance. The contents have not been disclosed, but the gesture itself shows that Leo XIV does not intend to ignore a cardinal who, with his words, has become the point of reference for a broad conservative front. For some observers, the audience was a test of Sarah's true position, to understand whether his criticisms remain merely theological reflection or risk becoming a concrete form of opposition to the pontificate. Indeed, the image that emerges is that of a pope, forced to confront a powerful interlocutor capable of voicing widespread discontent and exposing what many perceive as ideological tendencies. Yet, receiving him in audience indicates that Leo XIII, at least for now, prefers to keep a channel of dialogue open rather than exclude it. It's a strategic choice. Tension is present, but they are trying to manage it without definitive ruptures. A meeting of this kind, at such a tense time, inevitably has political weight, not in the reductive sense of a contrast between two figures, but as a signal that affects the entire Church. On the one hand, Sarah publicly expressed esteem for the pontiff, recognizing his merit in having brought Christ back to the center of his teaching. On the other hand, it is evident that Leo XIV wanted to test how far the cardinal intended to push his positions. The full significance of the dialogue lies in this precarious balance. As long as tensions remain manageable, the debate can even enrich the ecclesial debate. But if they were to escalate, the possibility of a rift cannot be ruled out. And this is precisely what is at stake: maintaining communion, despite the diversity of sensibilities, without the divisions turning into irreparable lacerations. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.